In this short example, we'll be working through the predictive modeling service in Bluemix, talking about the runtimes and platform as a service. Although Bluemix has now added containers and virtual machines, is beginning to open up infrastructure to the Bluemix customer. We see a number of services. Some of them are related to ops and other operations for the application. There's a lot more here than just developing new applications. We can see quite a bit of management and other interfaces, and down here at the bottom we'll see that there are also solutions, various solutions. These are extended catalogs, if you want to think of them in that way, where other offerings are being provided. So in the Bluemix catalog, we have boilerplates, which are more than a runtime environment, various runtimes we can write apps against. We have some of the Watson services, some mobile-specific services, DevOps, web application-based services. A lot of these are familiar to you. You guys can go out in Bluemix and look into them in more detail. Integration services, data management services, big data as a service. SQL databases, DB2-DB is more than that. Various security offerings. And then here's predictive modeling in the business analytics section and so forth. So we are in the catalog in the production zone of Bluemix as a beta service. You have to have an IBM ID to use Bluemix, either in the development zone or in the production zones. In the production, you'll get a trial. In the development zone, you get more than a trial period that you can actually use various things. Here in production zone, if you're under the trial, you'll be asked to be given your credit card to help with the charges. In this example, we'll create a web application using a Node.js runtime. So we'll name the application, tell Bluemix to create it, and next thing we see is it's staging the application for our use, putting it out there in a runtime container operating system that will actually run the service and make it addressable by a URL for our use. So in a moment, it will be ready to use. We go to the dashboard, launch the thing, and we see that it's a simple Hello World application. Now what we're going to imagine is that the developer is working on their application, building either a coordinator of Bluemix service or a full application up here on Bluemix, and they have a desire to add predictive analytics into the mix. And so they are going to go and here I'll jump into the application, and then I will add a service, and the service I want is here in business analytics and predictive modeling. When I add the service, I can choose from the various service plans. All we have is free out on Bluemix now. I'm going to bind it automatically to my application. We'll talk about what binding means in a moment. And I could look at the docs, I could investigate the service here, but I'll just ask to create it under the free plan here. So what happens on service creation is our service broker gets a provision event, and immediately we're going to get a bind event. Anytime you change the runtime environment of your application, it will have to be restaged. And so we say, yes, let's restage our application. And at that point, we'll have an instance of predictive modeling dedicated to this application. You may bind more than one application to each instance of your service, but I can have multiple instances of my application, auto-scaling the application. I can adjust the the memory size I need and so forth. All of these will affect my charges for that application. But then here on the dashboard, we see we have our one application and our one instance of predictive modeling. If we go into the predictive modeling, so now we're going to look into the application here on our desktop. We go out and look at the predictive model. We assume our data expert has built a predictive model for the application developer. We're considering the data analyst a separate role from the application developer here. We open up the model we'll be using in this example, and we see it's the drug 1N demo from the modeler install. Very simple scoring branch here. It's just input, model nugget, output. The key here is my application is going to write to the input data model and expect results that match the output data model. I can train my model here. I could actually radically change my scoring branch. I might even change model algorithms. But as long as I maintain the inputs my program is going to supply, and the scoring branch provides the outputs that my program expects, I can score with this. I can run with this. And so here in the okay, let's go back to Bluemix and deploy this model so that our application can use it. Here in the service instance, we have a drop deploy area. We'll just drop the file in. That goes out, and we're going to put an alias name on it for our application to reference in its scoring request. And eventually there'll be stats here on when we refreshed it and so forth, but right now it's fairly simple. While we're here, let's go out to the documentation for the predictive modeling service. We see a number of items here summarized, but what we want to take a peek at here is the API, the set of service endpoints that the programmer can use. So we see that we can deploy, refresh, download, or delete a predictive model here using the services. These calls are all described. We can also retrieve a copy of the model or score with the predictive model. The primary use case is, of course, to score with the model. Okay, now let's go out to our bound application and take a look at the credentials it's being handed. This is how it dynamically learns to connect to the scoring service instance and make its requests. We're going to grab this URL and the access key, and we'll use it in our desktop version of the program in order to talk to this service instance from our desktop. Now, the access key is both credentials that permit you to use the service instance, and it defines the namespace for where you've deployed your objects. So here in the application, we would have added those values. The application itself is sample 1 that we put out there in Bluemix for other people to use. We see that the scoring request, the REST call, is a simple payload that names the source node. It's called table name in our terminology, and lists the input attributes, the order in which the values will be presented, and then contains one or more rows of actual input values. Depending on your scoring branch design, you may produce one prediction per input row. You may produce one prediction per set of input rows. That's all up to you and your design. To make the request, we just are going to call the score endpoint and pass the basic information that we just prepared. If we go out then and prepare to run this Node.js application from our desktop, we'll have to ask the Node Package Manager to bring down all the pieces it's going to need to actually build the environment for us to run here locally. So we do the npm install from our package description for the sample, and we start the app. The app will put out some basic trace information and open up a port on our local machine here. So we grab a browser, we say, let's go to localhost port 3000, the default port, and we see the sample app. Sample app is just a basic form that will take the inputs required to score, submit the score request to the service instance, and display the results on the screen. That's interesting, but now let's go to Cloud Foundry and tell it what API endpoint we're going to be using. In this case, I'm using London production, and so I tell it where to go, and then I log in. And so do the Cloud Foundry login. I give it my IBM ID and the password for that ID. And it tells me where I'm connected. I then push this sample out to Bluemix, updating the code that's running in Bluemix. Our Hello World application is now replaced by the code in this sample. And watching Bluemix, I can see this application go through its restaging, and in a few moments it will be ready to run. The push itself is doing the same Node Package Manager installs that we just saw on the desktop. It's pulling the same content down into that Bluemix container, making that runtime environment ready to go, ready to run our application. And then it will restage and start the application for us. This just takes a moment. Okay, so that started. We can launch that URL to the Bluemix application. We see the same UI, the same delivery we had before. This set of inputs will be used to make the REST scoring call to the same service instance we just called from the desktop and return the same results. And so that is it for scoring. The application developer needs to know basically the alias to the model, the input and output metadata for scoring with the model, and that's all available, as you saw, either from service calls or in investigation of the model. And so we've separated the roles, the application developer coding to using predictive modeling versus the person controlling the deployments, whether it's the same person or not, etc. And then the data analyst, the person actually building the models. We don't assume an application developer is a model builder. And so that's it for our short introduction.